jump right into this topic then, playing well with others. Anyone in here, your church is going through kind of a transition time right now? Yes? Some of us, okay. How many of us, our churches, by the way, how is that going? It's bad? Is that what you said? It's just rough. And I have been part of a music staff that has taken a church from very traditional, not just this is the style we prefer, but this is the only style that God approves of, to a more contemporary. And so there are a lot of bumps and opinions and strong opinions. So I'm sorry. I've been there. Anyone else? How's it going in your ministries with this? Okay. Anyone gone through this kind of in the last 5 years, or are we all here kind of because this is where we're at? Or I signed up for the piano track and this was the piano session.
Well, hearing this makes me realize how fortunate I am in our church because we have both. We have 2 traditional services and 2 contemporary services. So I'm blessed.
it kind of helps with.
And I'm in part of both of them.
That's wonderful. I love that. I write for the traditional side of the music industry and I write for the contemporary side and everything in between. So I have an appreciation for it, but I know that not everyone does, and we all have different preferences. So, so this session is kind of on releasing our prior role as a church pianist to now we have a new role. And so you have a new role if your church has a band or a rhythm section. And it's very different than if you're playing with the organ or you're playing by yourself, We are no longer the lead instrument when we move into more of a rhythm section, a band. And a little disclaimer here, when I was a pianist in a volunteer rhythm section at my church. I was the paid position, and then it was a volunteer band around me. And so I was the lead instrument. I did take the lead because we had a guitarist who was very weak. We had a good bass guitar player, but she was just learning her instrument, and so she was still at the early stages. And we had a drummer that only knew how to play in 4/4. And so much of more contemporary styles is not in 4/4. There's a lot of 6/8 going on, and he didn't know how to do that. And so I would always take the lead, but that was more the exception than the rule. And up until now, you guys have probably been the full orchestra, right? You have been the melody, and you've been the harmony, and you've been the rhythm, and we have been the percussion, all of these things. As pianists, we get to do all of these things. And so we're kind of all things to all people. We're the complete package. We're kind of like a band in a box. If you just set us loose on our own, we can do it all. And yet in more contemporary settings, they don't want us to do it all. And so we have to learn, okay, what is my specific role in this ministry now? You've got, well, I need to stick to my notes because we don't have a lot of time today and I don't want to get too off track. Okay, so the good thing is that we can still be those things. We can still be the melody, we can be the harmony, we can be the percussion, we can be the rhythm, we can be all of those things when it's appropriate and when it is our time to be those things. So what this means practically, I'm going to give you a couple steps here, and I think this follows what I wrote a couple months ago. Congratulations, you have a new role. That's the first thing. Congratulations, you have a new role. What this means practically is don't step on your bass player. A lot of people will tell you when you're playing with a band to play more in the mid-range of the piano. I often will venture down into the lower register when I play, and I do that carefully. When I jump down to low bass notes, I'm very careful so as I don't step on my bass player. And I only do that when I know that I can totally lock in with what the bass player is playing. If they're riffing or improvising at all, which that is this style, they are going to improv and they are going to do some riffs and they're going to jump around. So I know that if I can lock in with what they're doing, I'll go ahead and I'll venture down a little bit, but give them their space. It's kind of like if you're on a volleyball team, you don't want to step in someone else's part of the court. Let them have their own court space. Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We're late.
Oh, that's okay. It's early, and we save front row seats for people who are late.
I know, so everybody will see us and
It's
know.
the seat of honor.
So we can interrupt.
There you go. No, it's all good. We have just started on what this means practically on your notes. Don't step on the bass player.
Thanks.
So does that make sense? Rather than, I like to play in the extremes. The extremes are excitement parts of the piano. When you've got your upper and your lower register, that's where all the excitement takes place. But when you're playing with the band, stay more in the mid-range a lot of times. And if you're going to go down to the bass, do it carefully and considerately. One thing I had to learn fast is that, and this caught me by surprise the first time I played with a rhythm section, is that you as the pianist, you're going to have to lock into the strum pattern of the lead guitar. And we are so used to, as church pianists, everyone locking into what we're doing, Even the choir director, we're supposed to be following them, but everybody knows that everyone's following the pianist. At least that's what my choir told me. I don't know. You need to lock into their groove, and that's a very different feel. A guitar groove is a different groove than a piano groove sometimes. And so if it's a big energy groove, it's like a really big bombastic song, you have two options. One is if you are on an electric keyboard, which a lot of times churches go to that in a band setting, this is a great time to play a pad. Pads are a setting on your keyboard that sometimes it's a string pad where it's just a sustained string sound, or more of an atmospheric pad where it just creates a harmonic fullness, sometimes a choral pad. That's a great time to play a pad. However, if you are on an acoustic piano, you have to lock into their actual groove. And sometimes, every guitar player has a little bit different groove that they do depending on the song. And there have been times when I'm playing with someone that I don't normally play with, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure out what they're doing there, their rhythm, so I can lock in and kind of play along with them. And there have been times where I thought, like in the moment, in a service, gosh, I don't think I'm locking in with them. And so what I do is I go to the lowest common denominator of rhythms. And I'll play, the downbeat, and I'll listen, and then I can feel the next downbeat, Okay, I think I can do the next one. He's just going off and doing something. Okay, I think I got it a little bit, And so we start with the lowest common denominator if you're lost. A good way to practice this, finding a groove, is to turn on some Christian radio or a CD, maybe that's a better option, or just an MP3 or something of your favorite praise and worship songs, and kind of find yourself locking in at the lowest common denominator rhythmically, and then as you kind of start to feel their groove, you lock in a little bit more. But you will have to learn to lock into the lead guitar strum pattern. And that surprised me when I first started doing this many years ago. Okay, number 3, become comfortable with a non-piano pad. We talked a little bit about pads a couple points ago. And these are all going to be different on every instrument, on your keyboards. If you play on a keyboard, every keyboard has a different sound bank. And there's some, general ones, but every instrument that I've played on, the pads all sound different. And they all respond to touch differently and to weight differently. And does everyone understand what a pad is? Did I explain that well? Okay. If you are on an electric keyboard, you've got the piano setting, and then you've got the trumpets and the flute and the oboe. You've got strings, and sometimes just the string sound. Sometimes it will say string pad. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it will just be strings. And so a pad is usually, or an atmospheric, just a harmonic fullness, a warmth sound without actually being a percussive where you strum and a note plays. It's more of it's kind of like a gas that permeates, kind of that kind of a feel, for the atmospheric pads. But they all are different on your specific instrument, and they respond to touch differently. Some of them, the longer you hold them, the louder they get, and I don't like that. I don't like it when the manufacturer manufactures in things that I'm not playing. Sometimes on the more funky atmospheric ones, you're holding it down, and then the longer you hold it down, the more bells and whistles it starts to play. And I'm like, wait, that's not what I'm going for. So learn your instrument. Learn the different pads that you're going to be using. Usually when I'm playing a pad, because a pad is so thick anyways, that's the purpose of it, to give some harmonic fullness. I don't usually play really thick chords because the sound is so full anyways. I don't do big cluster chords. I kind of keep it pretty open fifths, or if I need to add a third in there, I don't play a triad. I'll play space between the notes so that it's not so thick that I can't control it. I think I've already said this. Pads are usually string, atmosphere, or vocal choral pads, although there are some variations with special effects depending on your instrument. So be comfortable with a non-piano pad and learn your instrument. Number 4, know who's going to riff in interludes. I love to improvise interludes. I love this because I am an arranger and a writer, and there is so much freedom when I get to that. I can just go off and do my own little thing. Some of y'all hate it because that's where you're like, I don't know what to play. It's not on the page. This style is mostly improvisation. And so if you are one who likes to do little riffs and improv during interludes and between verses and stuff, you need to know who in your band is going to riff in the interludes. I love to improvise, like I said, and it's a great way to keep that energy moving. But if your lead guitarist or your trumpeter or your saxophone player decides that that's when he's going to riff at the same time and just go off and do his own little thing, you guys are going to kind of butt heads musically. It's going to sound bad, and people are not going to want to play with you, which is kind of the title of this session, Playing Well with Others. So know who's going to riff in those interludes, and that will help create healthy relationships interpersonally in your group. Number 5, know when you are supposed to be a rhythm instrument, when you are supposed to be a lead instrument, and when you are color. Okay. This means that you are either going to need to dialogue with your band ahead of time, that's where a good rehearsal comes in, or you need to know your arrangement really well. And I find that there are 2 philosophies in churches that have more contemporary music. The first philosophy is playing it exactly like the radio version they ask you to learn. And I know several big churches that do this. And it's not my favorite, but I totally understand why some of them do it. The pros are that everyone knows who is supposed to play what when. You don't have to sit down in rehearsal time and say, okay, are you going to take the interlude? Or when do you want it to become really big? When are we going to back off? Do you want me to drop out here? If you're playing it exactly like the radio version, or the exact arrangement that they give you, it takes out all of those questions. People don't step on each other. There are no surprises. And this is good for if you've got an A team and a B team and a C team, a rotating team of musicians, and you guys are kind of swapping in and out sometimes, and someone can just step right in and plug into someone else's spot at the last second. You know, their kid was sick that morning or something like that. The cons to this method is that it's unoriginal and less organic, which there's nothing wrong with that. The Holy Spirit can still work in structure. And he can work however he wants, in structure and non-structure. The less organic, I am not a huge fan of that because I am a creative person. And I don't like to be unoriginal. But that philosophy and that method works so well for some churches. And if that's what works for your church, great. The other philosophy on this is that your worship leader will hand you a basic lead sheet, and then the group kind of just does their own thing. They create their own arrangement out of it. You end up with something that looks like this, and you're like, well, how are we supposed to create that whole kind of a radio version out of this? It's because you actually do create your own arrangements. And the pros to this is that you can be way more creative with your arrangement. You can use the instrumentation that you already have in your church. So you have a great saxophone player. Well, highlight your saxophone. Say, hey, when we get to this right here, just go off and play something right there, okay? Everyone, the sax is going to do something right there, So you can play off of the strengths that you have, the instrumentation that you already have. Maybe you have an awesome fiddle player, or someone who just, is a killer banjo player. Well, that's when this style works really well, because maybe you've got a song that doesn't use the fiddle or the banjo or a mandolin or whatever you have that's really good. Someone that plays that one handbell really well. So that's where this philosophy really comes in handy. You can customize your arrangement to the length that you need, to the vibe that you need, to the energy level that you need. Sometimes we want a song to have a beginning of the service energy. Sometimes we want that same song to have a very reflective energy right before the sermon, or right before a prayer time. When you have something that looks like this and you just do your own thing, you can customize it to any part of your service that you want. The cons to that method is that there is more chance of players stepping on each other's parts. This requires more rehearsal, more communication, and sometimes makes it more difficult to pull off with a pickup team of church musicians. But they're both very valid philosophies, whichever style works with your church. But know, all that comes back to that point, know what your role is. Know when you are supposed to be the rhythm instrument, when you're supposed to be a lead instrument. So either learn your arrangement according to the radio version well, or if you do the other philosophy, have a lot of good dialogue and communication and rehearsal time, okay? Let me describe those. Lead means that you kind of do your thing and let others fall in with you. When I say you're the lead instrument. And of course, when I say do your own thing, we have to stick to the chords represented on the page, because then people really won't want to play with you if you're not sticking with that. But other than that, you can create the energy, and you can create the less energy and the vibe and the length and this and all of that you want. If you are more of a rhythm, you lock into what the lead is doing, but you can still be rhythmic in your chord structure. Okay? If you are color, you add embellishments at the right place. Kind of like, okay, in this interlude, the pianist, the keyboard player, you're going to be the color here, so you get to kind of go off and riff. If you're the pad, you give that full harmonic warmth. Okay? So let's move on to kind of the more nuts and bolts part of this session, which is reading lead sheets and chord charts, and that will be this part right here. A huge part of playing well with others is to speak their language, or in this case, to read their language. As church pianists, we have mastered reading notes on a page, right? You put notes in front of us and we play it and we have done our job well and we get a star. When we were in piano lessons in second grade, and if we played all of the notes on the page with the dynamics represented, we got 2 stars, right? And oh man, I would want 2 stars every single week, and it would just kill me if I could only get that 1 star, and then shame upon shame if I didn't get any stars that week on that. But we know how to read what's on the page. We are really good at that. We were trained to do that. And the grand staff, the key signatures and the time signatures, and success is when we play every note that's written, right? Especially if you were trained classically. So on the scale of 1 to 10, how many of you say, like if you're in the 0 to 3 category, I am really uncomfortable with lead sheets and chord charts, and I don't know that I could do it. I might just fall apart, have a panic attack. Well, good. That's none of us. How many of you are more like in the 4 to 7 where you say, I can do it, I have done it before, it wasn't the most polished thing, but I held my own, kind of. That's a lot of us. How many of you say 7 to 10 category, I'm pretty comfortable doing this, but there's always room to polish and grow? I think that's some of us that are too humble to raise our hands, pointing at people. Okay. Good. Well, this session is going to be, like I said, more nuts and bolts, and hopefully we're going to hit on all of those. And so, from those of you who really are a little bit insecure to those who do this every Sunday, a little disclaimer here is that you have to have a basic understanding of chord structure in order to follow this. And that, if that's not something that you're comfortable with, this session probably won't make a lot of sense. Okay, so there's a difference between a lead sheet and a chord chart, and a lot of people use those terms synonymously, and they're not. A lead sheet has melody written and chord symbols. So this would be the lead sheet part right here. You have the actual melody note on a staff. Okay. The scary part is that we are used to having our piano part spelled out for us note for note. And on a lead sheet, there is no designated piano part. And what's worse is that what is on the page, we're not supposed to play. It's kind of like they psyched you out there. So remember, in the praise and worship style of music, most of the time the piano acts as a rhythm instrument, and this is basically about 5% reading music and about 95% improv. And that's where I know some of you said that it kind of strikes a note of fear into us. But fear not, this is why you're here today, and so that we can learn. We're going to start with the bare bones on how to read a lead sheet, and then we'll kind of build on that. I thought that the easiest way to teach how to read a lead sheet is to actually put a lead sheet in front of you. A song that is pretty well known in most churches that use this style, and then just teach it from there. So the first thing that we're going to do, the lead sheet tells you a key signature, which we are in the key of. Good job. Good job for early in the morning. A time signature, which is 4/4. Hey, we're waking up a little bit. And sometimes it will give you a metronome marking if you've got a good site that you're pulling from, which this one is a good site. So quarter note equals 74. So the first thing that we want to do when reading a lead sheet is that we want to play a steady rhythm in our right hand using the chords that are already represented. You don't have to come up with new material. You're not having to arrange or write music if that scares you. You are using the chords represented. So in your right hand, you're going to play a steady rhythm. Okay? Your left hand is just going to play a very basic, again, bare bones here, basic one note, or at the most an octave, whatever the chord is that you're playing. So since we are in 4/4 time, I'm going to play a block chord on every beat. Since there are 4 beats in the measure, I'm going to play 4 block chords in my right hand. That's the steady rhythm that we're going to play. So it's going to sound like this. Everyone needs compassion, love that's never failed. Let mercy follow me. Everyone needs forgiveness, the kindness of the Savior. Love makes Did everyone follow what I just did there? Okay?
Left hand has to be on the downbeat, or
It does it wherever you see a chord represented. So the first B flat is on the downbeat.
just right here.
So that's where I would play that. The second measure, it falls on the downbeat. So that's where I play that. But if you look at, where did it do that differently? If you look at measure 9, you've got a chord on the downbeat, and then on beat 3, again, you kind of have to guess, but it's on beat 3 there. It's over that second half of the measure. And then, so I would play my left hand note right there, because that's when I'm changing the chord. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so if you understand what I did just there, you are a functioning rhythm section player. You're a functioning rhythm player. It might take a little bit of practice. It's not the most polished thing in the world. You probably won't get a job with a big band somewhere, but you are useful in ministry, and you can hold your own in a band, just at that level right there, okay? Notice that I did not play all of my chords in root position. Listen to this. Now, if I had played all of them in root position, this is what it would sound like. Like the beginner middle school praise and worship band, which if that's what you can do, Again, you have a place to start, and everybody has to start somewhere. You can still lock into what the band is doing. However, you're going to sound a lot more polished if you play inversions. Does everybody understand what a chord inversion is? So rather than root position, I will play a chord inversion that is closest, a lot of times, to the last chord I played. So my first chord I played in root position, the F chord, I'm going to keep the F in my pinky and just drop the other two down a step, okay? And then when you get to the D minor, all I have to do is move the C to the D because the other notes are already in place. And it's going to sound a lot more polished. Also, whenever you are jumping around and you're leaping around on the piano, that just increases your chances of playing a wrong note. So that's more incentive to stay close to home when you're doing a style that you're learning or trying to get a little bit better in. Okay, the next thing, you can also do a split block chord pattern in your right hand. You guys understand the block chord? You're just playing a block, okay? To add a little bit of variety, I'm going to take that block chord and I'm going to split it. So rather than having quarter notes now, I'm splitting them into eighth notes. So let's start at the chorus. Rather than say, it's going to be just a little bit because I increased the texture, which I know I'm jumping ahead of myself on that point. And it also broke up the monotony of playing a block chord all of the time, which will get really monotonous, and you really will sound like that middle school beginner praise and worship band if all of the time you just do a block chord. Also, another reason why I wanted to not do a block chord right at measure 11 is because the vocalists were singing on the beats, on 1, 2, and I wanted to give a little bit of filler in between there, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Do a mixture of those two, blocks and split blocks, in your piece, and that's going to give you some variety. It's going to relax the listener's ear a little bit. It's going to change your texture every now and then, which is a point that I hope we have time for later on. Okay, number 5. Use more sophisticated chords, if possible, without actually really changing the chord that much. This piece is not a good piece to demonstrate this on, unfortunately. I do it a couple times in here. Rather than playing a B flat chord at the beginning, a triad in root position, I take that third, which is the D, and I substitute a C in its place. So I eliminate the third and add a second a lot of times. It just adds a little bit of not so many triads by eliminating that third, adding the second. Some people say, well, you can just play them both. You can play the first, second, third, and the fifth. You could, but that gets you into a little bit different style. I don't use that often in this style. I like a little bit more of the open sound by eliminating that third, and we all know that thirds fill in the gaps and everything. Okay? Number 6. Don't play namby-pamby. That is the scientific word for that, I'm sure. Play stylistically. This style is based on rhythm and on pulse, so you have to give it a pulse. Even on songs that are a little bit more reflective. This is how I hear some people playing praise and worship. Nothing really wrong with it, but it doesn't give off a rhythmic feel. There's no pulse there. Number 9, embellish between phrases. If you look at measure 9, The vocalists are not singing at this point, and it's just you or it's just the band. And so you could just play the same pattern that you have been playing, and that's fine. But I like to add a little bit of melodic interest, especially in my right hand, to keep energy moving. So this is what I do. And it doesn't have to be that exact thing, but I added a little bit of a moving line through there. So basically I did, even if that's all you do, I just created a line, even in my block chords, but I like to add a little bit more interest. It's so much easier to phrase that than just block chords. Okay, also look over at measure 19. This is a place to embellish between phrases. No, we're gonna have to fly. Those four chords that are represented, the B flat, F, D minor, and C, those are the same exact chords as the beginning of the piece, right? And so when I get there, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to play the opening melody just as the interlude. Up to the second verse. This is what it sounds like if you just continue pattern. If you just keep your block chords, it's going to sound very awkward because it feels like it goes on for forever. It's already old and awkward, right? And all of that energy that you guys had built up during the chorus, you lost all of that. Okay, did you feel that? Just like there's nothing going on, it's just stagnant, we're losing energy. And especially in this style of music, when you have a power ballad like this, in a praise and worship style, almost always in a power ballad, it's the second verse that really starts building. And so I try to put in that melodic interest building into the second verse to be a springboard into that bigger sound. If you're just playing the block chords, you've given your congregation nothing to have that bigger moment in the second verse. Okay? Flying along. You will see rhythmic slashes. These basically just represent the 4 beats in each measure. I've had people come to me and say, I don't understand this. All of a sudden, in the middle of the song, there's slashes. Like, that's just the 4 beats. That just means continue pattern. And they say, well, why does it just throw them in there? Well, either it's because there are no vocals represented, and it still wants to show that there are 4 beats there to continue. Or sometimes, this is what really confuses my friend. She's like, why do they do this? You'll see a slash, slash, followed by a couple 8th notes, and then a slash. She's like, I don't understand. You've got notes and you've got slashes. Well, the first slash is beat 1, the second slash is beat 2, and then for some reason, the composer or the arranger really, really wanted you to play those 2 notes that are on a staff at that exact point. So you play those 2 notes or those 3 notes, and then you're back to a slash or whatever. So that's what that means. Don't let that throw you off. Okay, second verse. This is where we add more texture. This is where we add more interest rhythmically. This is a great place to break your block chords if you have not already done so. We want to add that texture. I don't think I'm going to have time to talk about texture at the end, so I'm going to talk about it real quick here, briefly. Texture is the how busy your rhythms are and how thick your chord is. How thick your chord is, your chord structure is, how busy your rhythmic activity is. Of course, if you're playing a whole note, that's a very thin texture, right? If you're playing 16th notes, that's a lot of rhythmic activity, so you're increasing texture there. Sometimes it has a lot to do with how much bass is used. So second verse is where I like to start to build my texture and to grow my texture. So I'll add a few more rhythmic elements in there with either my right hand or my left hand or both. I play thicker chords, and I usually bring my bass down a little bit. skip to the bridge at measure 27. And I only know this is the bridge because I know the song. It doesn't say that on there. The bridge is where, in this song, is where the song is the most intense. It has the most excitement. It has the most forward energy. And again, the only reason why I know that is because I know this song. So don't feel badly about, well, I didn't know I was supposed to add texture there or excitement there. It doesn't give you any indications that it would. You just have to know that. Know your song, and hopefully your worship leader will guide you through that if it doesn't say it on the music. So, since this is the most exciting part of the song, I want to increase my texture. So, pop quiz here. What's one way that I'm going to increase my texture?
Rhythmic activity.
Thank you. Thank you. That is going to be one of the biggest ones right here. So, what I'm going to do, since most of the time I've been playing block chords, I'm going to go to an eighth pattern in my right hand, and I'm going to put a little bit more rhythmic groove in my left hand. So it's going to be... Okay, so now, did you see how I increased my rhythmic activity there just by changing to eighth notes? I'm going to add a little bit more going into measure 31 because we've already done that, and it's repeating it, and I want to give it a little bit more substance here. So even sometimes my right hand is going to some 16th notes, and I added a few more notes in my left hand, little groove pattern there. And you might say, whoa, that is way beyond me right now. And I understand. This is something that we can grow into and work into, but that is how texture works. And if you want to create more excitement, more energy in a section, that is how you would do it. I know that I'm giving you like a crash course here today. So let me go down to measure 33. What happened there?
Slow down.
I actually didn't slow it down, but it had
Elastic.
it thinned out the texture, so it felt like
Yeah.
it felt like everything had just kind of come to a stop, even though it didn't. I changed my texture. I thinned it out because I didn't want to have a big building moment into the chorus. I wanted to bring it down. So we know it's going to go to a thinner texture because I wanted to change the energy. Did that make sense? Okay, good. Okay, moving road. Let me see here. You will notice that the accompaniment chords don't always match up perfectly with the melody notes. I heard a couple groans there. If you look at measure 4, let mercy follow me. You got a C chord with an F in the melody. That's going to create a rub and a clash. This style will have some rub in it, but I don't like that rub. And so when I get to something like that, I just change the E in my C chord to an F. And that happens a couple places in this song. So just be aware of that they don't always do. When you have been used to playing traditional music, everything is spelled out in that chord. If you want the 4 in that C chord, it spells that out for you, but not so much in this style. You just have to kind of watch out for that. Unfortunately, this is an issue that you are going to run across often, and there are some charts that are just awful that are floating around online, and sometimes it's because Joe Blow just, those were the 4 chords that he knew how to play, and so he puts every song he knows and squishes them into those 4 chords, and then he posts it online illegally, I might add. And so sometimes it seems like our worship leaders always find those charts, maybe because they're free, because they're illegal. But sometimes those are the ones that get handed to you, and that's just unfortunate. So I don't know what you can do about that, except encourage them to go to better sites and purchase good charts. Notice the very last measure. It does not end on tonic, which is, it's one of the characteristics of this style of music. It's not always going to end on tonic. If you are in a church worship setting, depending on the style and the culture of your church, a lot of times I like to resolve that. especially if you don't have a big band with lots of bells and whistles where they're doing, distortion fades and stuff like that, which for most of us, we don't have distortion fades in our services. So I'm getting some looks like, that's not my church. So let me see here. What does it end on? Oh, it ends on that C chord. Now, if I'm going to resolve straight to an F chord, I let it die out a little bit before I hit the F. Otherwise, it's going to sound very amateurish. If you hit that tonic too soon. It just didn't do it for me. So let the sound have time to decay if you're going to go straight to tonic. Another thing that I do often, if there is like the pastor or a deacon or someone is coming up to say a prayer or something and I have time, sometimes I will walk it down with a chord progression. So I work my way down if the service lends itself to that. Okay, a chord chart. The chord chart is different than the lead sheet because you only get
Chords.
you only get chords and lyrics, yes. So, how do you know what the time signature is?
You ask the director.
You asked the director, that is a good question. How do you know the tempo? How are you supposed to know where one measure stops, and another one ends? That's the one that kills me on this. How are you supposed to know the style of the song? And the answer to all of these, outside of asking the director, which is a great thing, the answer is you don't know by looking at a chord chart. It does not give you much information. And so don't feel bad, especially those of you who are, you're learning this style and you're trying to fit into the band. You're trying to hang on to your place of ministry. You're trying to find a new place of ministry in this section. Don't feel bad when someone hands you this and you're not exactly sure what to do with it because you don't know the time signature and you don't know where the measures stop and start and you don't know the vibe of the song. In the church that I served at for many, many years in the Dallas area, we did a over-the-top VBS every year, and that was kind of the goal, I think, was to do it over the top, which, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It is what it is. And so as part of their over-the-topness, they would hire some of the best players in the Metroplex, which Dallas-Fort Worth has some pretty darn good instrumentalists. They've got great symphonies, great bands, and so they would hire some of the top musicians in the whole region to come play in their VBS band. And so we had a killer band every year. And like I said, whether you agree with that or not agree with that, it was what it was. But even when we would hire in the best players, in the whole Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we handed them something like this, we also handed them a recording of what we wanted. Because even as good as they were at the top of their game, this does not give them enough information to successfully play in the band. So don't feel bad. Don't let anybody allow you to feel bad if you struggle with this, if you don't already know the song. These sheets were designed for people who already know how the song goes. You've heard it 1,000 times on the radio, or your church has sung this 1,000 times and you're filling in for someone. You're like, oh, I just can't remember what chords, so show me what chords, and I know how the song goes. I just need to know what to play at that note or whatever that word. That's why these were designed, okay? Stick to the notes, Heather, stick to the notes. Remember that chord charts were designed for improvisational playing. And that's where, again, we have a little bit difficult time as traditionally trained pianists. And we feel at loss sometimes with so little on the page. So, for example, the introduction. What are you supposed to play? It gives you 4 chords. And, as classically trained musicians, we look at that and we see this. And you're worship leader said, well, that's not how it's supposed to go. And you say, but that's what's on the page. So those are things that, again, you would only know if you knew the song. And if you look where verse 1 starts, those are the first 4 chords. And so usually in this style, now when we do traditional hymn playing, we always pull the last 4 bars or the last 8 bars for introduction, right? Not in this style. In this style, you're going to take the first 4 bars or the first 8 bars as your introduction. So if I'm playing this by myself, I would probably put in some kind of a little melody here. And that's okay. Then you can just chord it, keeping the melody running through your mind so you know when to change the chords. If you are playing with a band and you've got another lead instrument, let them take the melody. And you can just chord or you can pad, or remember how we talked about know what your role is for that particular song. Whatever your role is, you do that for that song. But if you're playing by yourself, that is how you would do that. If the song is very upbeat to start with, I don't really even worry about melody for the introduction. I just provide a groove. Like for Lord, I lift your name on high. I didn't even worry about the melody there. So with high energy songs, it's not so important to have that little melody going. Okay, when reading a chord chart, the chords on the page fall in the general area of where they are supposed to. It's even less exact than a lead sheet, so good luck with that. A great editor will get them pretty darn close. Unfortunately, when this style first kind of hit the internet, and there were all of these downloadable sites that were popping up that would sell you the charts, which that's great that they were selling them because they were doing it legally and this and that. But they did a horrible job of editing them so that they were user-friendly and that the chords lined up with the lyrics. Thankfully, over the last 15 years, they've cleaned up their act a little bit, and there are some very good reputable sites out there. Everyone has done a much better job of making these more accurate and more user-friendly. But still, you are going to get some chord charts where you're not quite sure exactly where that falls. And so a rule of thumb that doesn't work every time, but often a rule of thumb is when in doubt, change the chord on major beats closest to what's written if you're not exactly sure. And usually after you hear a song once or twice and you rehearse it with the band, you quickly find where it doesn't quite match up. How am I doing on time? Okay. Oh, I'm going to go really, really fast. Tips. Number 1, become comfortable with a lot of sharps. Your guitarist will want to play in sharps, and I have never played in sharps so much as I have in the last 15 years. You know, sometimes your guitarist will capo, but most of the time they're going to want you to change. And praise and worship is written in all sharps, which is kind of a shame because we as pianists, we all learned in flats, especially if you are my generation or older. We learned all of our flats first, and so we have always struggled with sharps because that was kind of an after-the-fact thing. And what did we do in traditional hymn playing? When we got anything other than 2 sharps, we transposed it to flats, and we just winked at the organist, you know, and they knew what we were going to do, or a nod. I remember always hearing around nodding. It's like, okay, we're going to go from 3 sharps to 4 flats, or whatever it was, you know. So become comfortable with the keys of A, E, and B. Those are the keys that you're going to play in often, and those are the keys that we as pianists don't like to play in. Like I said, if you were trained my generation or older. Sometimes they'll capo up to a flat key signature. Most of the time, you will be the one who needs to make the change. When I first played with a guitarist, you know, way back when this style was just really gaining ground, it was to lead our youth praise team they were going to lead big church, you know, in a service. And so I had 3 really, really wonderful singers at that time. And so I created this perfect worship set for their voices. I knew where the tenor's comfortable range was. And so I made sure I put all my keys so that he could hit his sweet spot but not get too uncomfortable. I knew that my soprano wasn't a high soprano, but she also had a really light voice, and I knew that my alto, I knew all of their voices, and I created this beautiful worship set, custom tailored exactly to their voices. And so I wrote out all of the chords and everything, and I handed it to our guitar player, who was also a teenager, but he was excellent. And he looked at it and he said, well, I don't play in 3 flats. And I thought, you're such a good guitar player. How comes you don't play in 3 flats? I said, okay, what key would you like to play this in? He said, E. I said, okay, well, that's close enough. I don't think that will throw the singers off. So, okay, I'll fix that. And so I said, well, here, this one should be a lot easier. This one's in F. It's only 1 flat. He's like, I don't play in F. What? How do you not play in F? That's only 1 flat. I don't play in it. I said, well, what keys do you play in? I only play in keys with sharps. And I thought, well, that's just really silly. But the more I learned about this style, the more I learned that is just the norm. Guitarists prefer to play things in sharps unless they are a classically trained guitarist. And they play in all the key signatures, as do we, So, okay, number 2, make sure you understand how altered chords work. A C2, no 3 chord has a very different sound than a C chord. You subtract the 3 and add the 7 into place. An F sus chord will be very different than an F chord. If you are playing an F chord, an F triad, and your guitarist is playing an F suspension, it's going to clash very noticeably and they will not want to play with you. Again, playing well with others. If you are playing a G chord in root position and there is a G over D written, you will noticeably clash with your bass guitarist and it will sound muddy, and again, they will not want to play with you because it makes them sound bad, it makes the group sound bad. Lucky for us, this style of music only has very basic chord alterations. If you were to play in a jazz group, they are very complex. And so, like I said, lucky for us, we don't have to deal with a lot, but the ones that are written, you really have to make sure that you have, otherwise it's not going to sound great. The thing that separates the pro from the amateur is by using correct texture and knowing when to change that texture and energy. And I am down to the last couple seconds here, so I'm not going to talk more about that. But we talked about it enough, so I think that you guys have a pretty good feel and a handle for what texture is and how increasing texture increases energy and how decreasing texture decreases the energy at points where you want it to be a little bit more open and suspended, a little bit more reflective. So